to the BioHub. Today, we're honored to have the CEO and founder of A28 Therapeutics. With a remarkable 25-year career in life sciences across clinical research and drug development, he is a true leader in the field. Formerly Chief Medical Officer at Ansun Biopharma, he successfully led late-stage trials, helped secure a $100 million Series B, and contributed to strategic in-licensing efforts. In 2021, he founded A28, aiming to revolutionize global cancer care. Please welcome Dr. Stanley Lewis. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Good morning, Max. I'm great. Thank you.
Good. Pleasure to have you. Let's crack on. So, first of all, can you provide an overview of your career journey and how you got started in your field?
Sure. So I am an internal medicine physician by training. Trained at the University of Texas Medical School at Houston, where I did my internship, residency, and fellowship, and then joined the faculty there for several years. I did what faculty members do. I saw patients. I taught residents and students and did some clinical research. The clinical research part was probably the most rewarding and most interesting portion to me. I worked in the field of HIV disease and helped to develop new medications for patients. At that time, HIV was a really, really difficult disease to treat. The medications that we had were very toxic. So I was very keen on trying to find new therapies that were much more tolerable for patients. And it was from there I was recruited into a biotechnology company that was developing just such a therapy that was particularly well tolerated. Certainly all the patients that I enrolled on clinical trials were enjoyed that medication. And that's where I was sort of bitten by the drug development bug.
Yeah, nice. So can you share the origin story of A28 and the inspiration behind its founding?
Well, yeah, I think that sort of merges with my story for the most part. I'm not sure if I found A28 or if it found me, to be honest. So after I transitioned into the biotech world, the first company that I was the medical director in, that company was purchased by a much larger company. And that company did not want to go into the field of HIV. And so they asked me to stick around and help them out-license the product that I was working on. And I did that to another small company. And we were very fortunate to get that drug all the way through the FDA approval process and onto the market. It is now called Trogarzo, and it's approved for treatment of multi-drug resistant HIV disease, something I'm very proud of. We were able to successfully navigate that regulatory path. And then it was after that I got recruited to come out to California to work with another small company, Ansun Biopharma, you mentioned, to work on a drug for treatment of hospitalized influenza. And it was about that time that COVID entered the world scene and dominated the world scene. And actually, I like to say it often say it cured the flu. We were working on a drug to treat the flu, but no one was getting the flu anymore. So it was difficult to enroll that trial. And during that time, I was also charged with trying to find additional drugs for our company to develop. We had lots of cash, and but we only had this one asset. So I went looking around for items, assets that we could develop, and I ran across one that was really very interesting to me. It was like an antibiotic in that it was a lytic peptide. And lytic peptides like vancomycin or daptomycin, these are all lytic peptides. But it had been retooled to treat cancer. They'd put a targeting unit on it, which was this hormone that would bind to cancer cells, and then it would just kill cancer cells like antibiotics kill bacteria. So I came from the infectious disease area, which was sort of my home, but oncology was an area that was also very near and dear to me because like everyone, I'd lost family members, including my father, to cancer. And so the opportunity to develop a drug that would treat cancer was very intriguing to me. And that I had this background in infectious disease and this molecule resembled an antibiotic seemed like a perfect fit.
Yeah, and just going back to COVID as well. I don't think I've really spoken about this pre-pandemic, but what was it like to almost be like on the
Oh,
front line?
it was a pretty incredible time for us, as it was, I'm sure, for everyone, because we didn't really know what was going on. It was an area of time where you felt you felt afraid, because you knew the limitations of our industry. You knew the limitations of the sort of the medications and the tools that we had to treat this, which was essentially none. And we were employing mostly public health type efforts to fight COVID. Um, but I was also hopeful because in that process we learned a lot. We learned a lot about how quickly we could mobilize our resources. We learned a lot about how quickly we could use some of the tools that we've been using for other things and repurpose them to address this COVID crisis. And in the end, uh, I think we came out a stronger, a stronger industry on the other side. Efforts that we had within our own company to address COVID were not successful, but they were definitely. It wasn't for lack of trying, because everyone was
Yeah,
putting their attention on trying to come up with a solution for that terrible disease.
yeah, that's interesting. That that you talk about it being better for the long term of the industry. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, well, it was difficult in the moment for sure, but it's nice to have. You know, I'm I'm I feel confident that we've got the worst of it behind us. I won't say it's all gone, but for sure,
Yeah,
I think we have a much better handle on it. And it would be a terrible shame if we didn't learn some things that would be useful for us going forward from that ordeal.
yeah, 100%, 100%. So, on terms of the next question, what advice do you have for aspiring entrepreneurs looking to enter the biotech industry, especially those with innovative ideas or technologies?
You know, I'm very fortunate because I've had the opportunity to be on that forefront, as you discussed with COVID, and as
Mhm.
was the case with HIV disease, and now as it is with cancer, to be on the forefront where you're looking forward to new and better ways of treating patients. And I would advise entrepreneurs, really. Really three things. You really have to be in touch with your why. Why are you doing this? What's important to you? What are you really passionate about? Because it's a long journey, and it's a difficult journey, and you're going to run into some hurdles. And I think that's probably the second thing I would say is you need to be resilient, because there are going
Mhm.
to be some things that you didn't expect. There's going to be some difficulties that were unforeseen, that you'll have to get over. So you need to be very, very committed to whatever your dream is, which is why it's so important for you to be passionate about it. And then finally, I would say make friends. you know, you this is not something that you can do alone. You'll want to surround yourself with helpful people, skilled people, smart people. You'll want to have mentors, people who've done it before, perhaps, that can give you guidance. But I would also say it's a super fun journey too. So don't be afraid. Um, I mean, you will have some fear. There will be some things that keep you up at night, that sort of intimidating things.
Yeah,
But just don't let those things guide you. Don't let them block you. Don't let them prevent you from getting to your dream. Um, that's the only way we advance in this society, and I think that's how we grow as people, as we overcome our doubts, our self doubts, and our fears. So, entrepreneurial journey is a journey that will be, by definition, it's going to have some things that you find uh, a little bit frightening, because you're stretching yourself, and you're stretching your industry. You're stretching what we know right now, the known, into some areas of the unknown. But
yeah.
boy, it's nothing more exhilarating than taking that adventure.
Is there a right time as well to go and take that plunge and do that venture? Or
I've never really thought about that. I think the time, uh, the time sort of comes together and sort of finds you. kind of like I did with this molecule. It's a sort of
Yeah.
comes together when it comes together. When you're ready, you'll know that there's a call. It either comes from you being discontented with the way things are, or
Yeah.
there's just something that you really want to see in the world, and then you realize that you're the only one, or you think you're the only one that can make that happen. You think you're the best person for sure that can make that happen, and you realize that no one is going to do this unless I do, and that's a big part of the timing. It's when you realize that
Yeah.
that's when it's time to go for it.
Yeah. So there's no part of you, especially now you're doing it, that wishes you'd done it sooner, or
There is a part of me that sort of wishes I'd done it
okay.
sooner. I do believe that um, that there is a maturation process, a sort of gestation process,
Yeah.
that you go through, and everyone's timing and journey is different. But if I were to look back, I was I was too afraid. I was too timid. I was too fearful earlier in my career to just take the plunge into being an entrepreneur. So if I had a chance to go back and do it over, I would have brushed off those fears and jumped right in much sooner.
Oh well.
But alas, this is where I find myself, and it's not too late.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like I did benefit from some of those experiences, and hopefully they'll make the journey smoother going forward.
No, I completely agree with all that. Yeah. So, look, biotech companies often focus on innovative therapeutics. How do you approach the design of clinical trials for novel treatments, considering the unique aspects of these groundbreaking therapies?
Well, at A28, we are really focused on creating safer therapies. One of the paradigms that was true in HIV disease where I was before and is also true now for cancer patients is that sometimes the treatment is more difficult than the disease. At least the patients oftentimes will tell you that I don't know which one I fear most, the cancer itself, or the HIV itself, or all of these toxic therapies that I'm going to have to endure in exchange for perhaps a few more months or a few more years of life. And so, innovative to me means going beyond that which we have in terms of its efficacy, but also going beyond what we have in terms of its safety. So when I think about clinical trials, when I think about treatments and how we can make things more groundbreaking, I try to create a balance between making things more effective as well as making sure that we are addressing the safety issues. I took this Hippocratic oath when I became a physician to first do no harm, and I took that oath very seriously. So the thing I like a lot about the therapies that we're developing at A28 is that they can bring a great improvement relative to the efficacy of how we treat cancers, but also that they're remarkably safe. I should say remarkably well tolerated molecules when you think about them on the scale of existing cancer therapies.
Mm. Yeah, nice. Nice. So adaptive trial designs are becoming more common in biotech. Can you discuss your experience with adaptive trials and their impact on the efficiency and success of clinical development programs?
Yes, well, we're applying an adaptive trial design to our next phase of development,
Oh, nice.
and that is to say that you take the results at some portion of your trial, some interim portion, or some predefined time point in your trial, and you look at the data and use that data to more efficiently design subsequent portions of the clinical trial. In our case, we're going to look at the dose and dose optimization, as well as the proof of concept of our molecule in the first 20 or 30 patients. And then we'll look and see how well we did in terms of selecting those patients, in terms of the dosing regimen, how much, etc. And then use that information to design the second portion of our trial, which we envision will be appropriate for potentially an accelerated approval. So adaptive trial designs are much more efficient than the old way of doing things, which required you to do a clinical trial, get your results, analyze your data, shut all of that down, and then start a new clinical trial based on that information. This just allows us to go seamlessly forward, and hopefully will result in better outcomes and certainly faster outcomes for patients who are waiting.
Yeah, nice. So collaboration is key in clinical development, involving partnerships with research institutions, CROs, and other stakeholders. How do you approach these collaborations to optimize the execution?
I do believe that there's an old African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So collaboration is very key if you're going to take this, sort of all the way, particularly in clinical development, and finding partnerships, whether they are with other pharma companies, or whether they're with your funding partners, or whether they're with other research institutions or your vendors, is an extremely important part of this. There's no part of this that says that you can that the sponsor can do it sort of all by themselves. And if you can develop those relationships with like-minded partners and like-minded groups, it can bring so much more innovation and so much more richness to the product, as well as improve on the time and reduce the cost of the development. So I rank collaboration as one of the top things that can serve to energize and optimize the drug development process.
Yeah, and how do you find the right person to collaborate with then?
That process is really, in my experience, has been much more sort of hit or miss. I think that there's an old saying, preparation is to performance as circulation is to luck. So to find the right collaborators, you really need to circulate. You can't sit at home and sort of think about it in a vacuum. You have to get out, you have to talk to folks, and in that process, you'll get lucky, and you'll eventually find your way to the folks who have that thing that you need that's going to help you get through the next step, get over the next hurdle, traverse the next obstacle in your development journey, in your pathway. But there's not a handbook. There's not a handbook. There's not a blueprint on, you're doing this, you have to collaborate with this person, and this person. Where it's much more of a relationship building. It's much more of a dance. You find the person who doesn't step on your toes, and you guys enjoy the same music.
I agree, because I come from the other side of that. I'm looking to collaborate with people like you, and work with you. I should have added recruiters to that list and that question. Yeah. Because I get that it's all about relationship building and finding people you get along with as well, more than anything.
Yeah, I think that you nailed it. It's difficult. This work is hard enough, and then get stuck with someone that you can't get along, or you have opposing views or antagonistic ways of getting things done. Oh boy, that can make this very torturous. So yeah. So very important to connect with like-minded folks who are interested, have the same goals in mind as you have, and similar approaches to the task at hand.
No, I definitely agree with that. Definitely agree. So moving back onto A28, what would you say is the core mission and vision of the company?
Well, our vision is we envision a world where cancer patients do not fear the cancer or its treatment. So that harkens back to this idea that we really want to bring forth therapies that are more safe, that are more well tolerated than the currently available offerings for treating this disease. That's really very important to me. It was motivating to me in HIV, and it still continues to be a very core motivation for me, and thus a vision of this company. Our mission for the company is to get our lead compound, AT101, through its developmental hurdles. That is, to demonstrate prospectively our proof of concept, to optimize our dose, and then ultimately get this drug approved so it can be an offering for patients with multiple different kinds of cancers that express the receptor that our particular molecule targets. We also, sort of more broadly than that, as a mission, because we do have a pipeline of products behind our lead compound, we want this to become a new paradigm, sort of a shift in the way that cancer drugs are, a shift in the way that we think about cancer drugs. And I say that to say, there's this example I like to give in this instance where you think about the flight attendants on a plane, and they give the safety briefing, and they often tell you about the aisle path lighting that will change in color when you reach to an exit, and keep in mind that the closest exit may be behind you. And I think that's one of the things that, as part of our journey with A28, is we want to remind folks in our field, folks doing drug development, folks that are pursuing therapies and treatments for cancer, that hey, the closest exit may be behind you. Sometimes we get really obsessed with some of the more complex and the more sort of sexy science that is a big part of what we do. And it's not that I don't think those things won't work. I do think that a lot of these very clever and elegant ways of of going deep into the science will ultimately lead you to an exit. But in our case, our molecule is pretty simple. It's like that exit right behind you. It was the closest thing. We have a molecule. It looks like an antibiotic. It behaves very similar to antibiotics, and it's conjugated to a hormone that helps you target the exact cells that you're trying to kill, which are the malignant cells, the cancer cells, and it works pretty quickly and in a very simple mechanism that I think will be a refreshing new way of thinking about cancer, not as this complex, not as this sort of overwhelming thing, but actually something that we can think of in very similar ways as we think about bacteria, and usually think about those types of diseases as things that we have no reason to fear. We will definitely come up with something that can take care of it. That's what I really hope for A28. I hope it ushers in this new way of thinking.
I think that's amazing, and you can really see the passion as well when you're talking about it, which is massive. And look, biotechs often face challenges in terms of funding, resource allocation. How has your company navigated these challenges to secure the necessary support for its growth and development?
Well, that's a good question, because we're still in the process of raising a Series A, which is $20 million funding round to help us get back into the clinic, get our drug manufactured, conduct this clinical trial to demonstrate the proof of concept, as well as some dose optimization. And then even more funding will be needed after that to conduct a larger trial, or finish conducting the ongoing trial to get to an accelerated approval. And this is sort of the worst time in the world to be in biotech. Boy, if we'd just done this 2-3 years ago, it would have been a much different story. The worst time in the world to be trying to raise money within this field. It's one of those times where the market has sort of shifted, and there's a bit of a correction after perhaps over exuberance into the field 2 or 3 years ago, sort of during the COVID pandemic. And now there's been sort of this pullback, and it's difficult for companies to gain the attention of potential funders, and then for those funders to embrace sort of something that's sort of new and sort of different. I've heard it said that venture capitalists invest in the second trip to the moon. It's the visionaries who invest in the first trip to the moon. So if I was developing a Me Too type of therapy, a therapy that has multiple examples of approved drugs that have used the same mechanism or very similar approaches, I think that my life would be a lot easier. But when you're an entrepreneur and you're developing a product that's innovative in the space, innovative in the way it looks, innovative in the way it works, then you've got to get more visionary and more less risk averse funders. So that's been a little bit more difficult for us to find.
Yeah.
But we're hanging in there. We feel like this is a treatment that deserves an opportunity,
Yeah.
and we want to continue to press forward.
Yeah, you're definitely right. The last year, has been tough.
Brutal.
Even like me, like trying to find people hiring. It's much tougher than it's ever been. At least while I've been in the industry. I don't know if it's the same for you in the industry.
I would agree. Yeah, I have not seen, and I was here for 2008, 2009, and the big recession in the United States and sort of globally. There was a pullback, but this is, this is different. This feels even more barren than
Yeah.
those days.
Why is that though? Because you could argue that the economy was in worse state back then than it is now. So
I would agree, and I think that's probably a better question for for one of the VCs. I think if I look at it from where I sit, I think the missed opportunity here, the reason that the market is sort of not working smoothly the way I had hoped it would move, is because the larger pharmaceutical companies that are flush with all this cash that they got from COVID during that period of time when when things were probably flowing too much, have not taken that cash and done the necessary level of merger and acquisition of the smaller companies that are starved for funding anyway. So if you've got a company that's a small private company that can't raise money, and because the VCs aren't investing, and they can't IPO because the market window is closed, then large pharma should say, well, we can negotiate a really good deal, right? Because there's a lot of supply. There's a whole lot of supply of these small companies. So I should be able to get a great deal and come in and purchase some of the better programs. But we just haven't seen the kind of merger and acquisition activity, and certainly not at the level that we would have need to see it to sort of get this sort of ball rolling again. And that's, in my opinion, it's always easy to just blame everything on big pharma, but I do wish we would see more of merger and acquisition activity, and I think that would get investors excited again. It would certainly get the VCs to feeling better because now they're getting the exits that they thrive on, and then once they start getting exits, of course, then they start putting more money into smaller startups, and this this cycle gets a chance to resume. So we're really waiting on that that kind of activity to happen. We've got a JP Morgan conference coming up next month, and hopefully with that and some renewed awareness and renewed vigor, that we'll start to see this 2024. Hopefully, will be the last of the barren times.
Yeah, we're all praying for it. Definitely all praying for it. So what role does collaboration, I suppose you maybe touched on it a little bit there, with external partners or research institutions play in your company's innovation strategy?
Well, it's really related now, but beyond just the vendors and the advisors and other companies that we may want to work with, it really does extend to this idea of sort of merger and acquisition. Once we can get our product to a stage where we have the prospective proof of concept, and we've made a few more clinical, we've checked off a few more clinical milestones, I believe that becomes an opportunity for us to then take this product and market to, present it to potential suitors who can then add their commercial muscle to helping us move this thing on into the clinic. I believe that with the results that we have from previous clinical trials that show that the drug is very well tolerated and hint at where we can find the most efficacy in which patients will benefit the most from this. I have no doubt that if we can just duplicate that, if we can even come, half as much of what we've seen before in our retrospective analyses, that we will be able to get this product into the hands of a larger institution that'll be able to push it on across the finish line. And if we don't, then hopefully by then the IPO markets will be available, and our corporate strategy will shift to becoming public.
Yeah, nice. And then, look, we're just going to finish on this last question, and it's something that I see a lot of all the time, being in recruitment of the industry. So interested to know everyone's thoughts on it, but let's see what you say. So, biotech has historically faced challenges related to diversity. Can you share your insights into the current landscape of diversity within the industry, and what steps are you taking?
Oh, well, I think you're right. Biotech, is a huge industry. It's so part of the whole bigger, even more broad healthcare industry that makes up, perhaps a fifth of the United States GDP. Yet it remains a very segregated, racially segregated industry, for the most part. And I would also say that extends to women as well. And I think one of the problems is when we talk about this is that we conflate all the different kinds of diversity. That word diversity is so diverse, right? So there's this global diversity in healthcare outcomes, right? This sort of disproportionate outcomes as it relates to women and racial minorities, underrepresented, sort of minorities. That, for instance, blacks have 3 times more likely to get an amputation for the same condition as their white counterparts, right? So it's that idea that healthcare is not serving people sort of equally.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's diversity that sort of relates to the workforce, right? Are we attracting talented young girls or talented racial minorities, getting them interested in science, technology, engineering and mathematics, these sort of STEM courses, making sure that is available and presented as an option for those who may have that kind of dream or may not just be totally unaware. Then there's diversity of clinical trials. Do racial minorities, do underrepresented minorities, do women participate in clinical trials at the same rate as other races or the male gender, thus telling us that the medications or treatments that we're studying are actually safe and effective across all the sort of spectrum of potential potential patients. And then you have this diversity that's probably more related to what you were referring to, which is diversity within the life sciences industry itself, right? Are we hiring? Are we retaining? Are we promoting the talent that we have? Is the talent that comes into our companies being allowed to be heard, made to feel like they belong, and are they having the same opportunities to be them, sort of be their authentic selves within the company? And that's one other sort of area of diversity. And all of these areas need to be addressed. But the one that gets to me the most is, and of course I'm biased, but the one that gets to me the most is the diversity in funding, right? When you look at the billions of dollars that have gone into funding of biotech companies over the last year, about 2% went to women entrepreneurs and women founders. But
that's crazy.
But 0.13% went to Black founders. So there's a really huge disconnect when it comes to the opportunity for women and sort of BIPOC minorities to get the chance to have their dreams funded. and I want to have my dreams funded too, right? I want to be able to pursue the things that I believe will be helpful and useful and beneficial to our society, and that will give us an opportunity to move beyond our sort of current plateaus, where I think we've sort of gotten stuck and become almost, satisfied with sort of incremental changes. I want breakthroughs. I
Hmm.
want to change. I want to put cancer in the rearview mirror. I want to turn the tables here. And if we're going to do that, if we keep doing the same, if we keep funding the same companies, if we keep funding the same people all the time, well, don't be surprised if you get the same results, the same
Yeah.
incremental changes. But if we could bring some new voices to the table, if we could bring some new faces, to the table, and fund some of those ventures, then maybe we can get some breakthroughs here and move move beyond where we currently are. I think that I'm super excited and I'm super optimistic about the potential for diversity in our industry and what it will mean up and down the entire spectrum of the ways that you can look at diversity. But I do know this for sure: we got to do better. you know, it's really one of those areas, I think, within our society where diversity would really help,
Yeah.
and I think where diversity is really needed.
No, I agree. And you've actually given me a really different outlook onto it as well. I never knew that about fundraising and how little goes to
It's
black and female founders. That's crazy.
Well, it's tough out here for sure. And there's an old saying in my community. Well, if they get a cold, you get pneumonia, right? And it's one of those things that, as you've seen the pullback in general from the biotech industry, it's just become that much more difficult for minority entrepreneurs
Yeah.
to attract the funding. So, to whatever degree this podcast can increase the awareness and hopefully, spark a conversation and ultimately spark change, then it'll have been worth it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad I heard it. And yeah, it's something I talk about a lot, but yeah, like you're right, very much from a progression and a team's look on it. But I suppose I've been quite short-sighted in the way I've looked at it and not thinking about all the other factors that come into it. I've worked with companies that only focus on like Asian prevalent cancers and things like that. So I knew about those aspects, but not to the point that even fundraising. That's crazy.
Yeah, well, it's a big issue. Diversity. Like I said, I tend to divide it up into lots of different categories, and we can speak about any of them at length. I mean, you could have a whole podcast on
Oh
any
yeah.
one of those aspects: clinical trials, or promotion and hiring, and STEM. You can talk about sort of about any of those things. Disparities in healthcare outcomes. You can talk about any of those things. But if you ask me, I think that the one thing that if we can address that would have a trickle down effect is the diversity in funding, because that I'm not going to have a problem, hiring and promoting women or racial minorities. That would just be
Yeah.
sort of antithetical to my existence, right? And you can guarantee you that when I do a clinical trial, I'm going to be very conscious and
Hmm.
very supportive of making sure that there are going to be adequate representation, so that we'll know that our drug is safe across different racial and
Yeah.
gender lines. So by funding our entrepreneurs of color, I think we can reap benefits all across the entire diversity spectrum.
Yeah, I agree. And I actually think that's a really great place to leave it.
All right.
On such a big topic. So, look, I thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Stanley. I've actually really enjoyed it, taken a lot out of it as well. So hopefully everyone else has.
Well, thank you very much, Max, and happy holidays to you and your family.
Thanks, Stanley. See you later. Bye.
Best to you.